You don't
Just check out some sources like space.com or use Google News and type in the word planet for some interesting results. I'm going to note here that of over 200 known planets outside of our solar system, this is the very first one that's been discovered that scientists are saying may be Earth-like, i.e. inhabitable by folks like us. Maybe some water, maybe some clouds. There's nothing definite yet on it, of course, and it's a long way away, but I'd encourage you to do a little web surfing for the word planet on Google News or your favorite source, and you'll get some interesting results. It's big news. It was on the front page of the Roswell Daily Record last week. Nick, how are you today?
Hey, Guy, I'm doing good. How's it going?
Oh, it's going very well here, except for a couple technical difficulties that started the show. That is not new to our show, though. I'm glad it's not your first time, because you know it happens occasionally.
Oh, the pesky men in black.
Yeah, well. There's also technical ghosts in the machine. Just for those who may not know, Nick is the author of several books, many of them UFO-related, like Cosmic Crashes, Body Snatchers in the Desert, and you can see our archives on live.roswell.com for more. Scroll down just about 3 weeks ago, Nick was on here discussing some of his previous books, and you can see links to his book titles and stuff like that. But today he's going to be discussing Celebrity Secrets, which is FBI files on some of your favorite people, like Marilyn Monroe and Elvis Presley and Guy Malone. No, I don't think I'm in there, am I? I don't think I'm one of the people that made it in your book. I'm not a big enough celebrity yet, huh?
Well, maybe one day, you never know.
Okay, I'll keep working on that. Yeah, the first story I was going to mention, because I'd like to hear your comments on it. It's going to be very likely near and dear to your heart, and I'll be pretty disappointed if this is the first you've heard about it.
Okay.
But did you hear about the huge UFOs reported by airline pilots over your home country?
Yes, I did. This has been actually in the news quite a lot in England. I've been following the story from the US here in Dallas. You're just really looking into what the response is as far as the UK media is concerned and the UFO community. And there have been various theories put forward, as inevitably there is. I think the most important thing is the original witness testimony, which came from particularly one pilot in particular, near the island of Guernsey, which is between England and France, who reported seeing this UFO performing extraordinary maneuvers, and this was just very, very recently, in the sky, and of course as a trained observer, he was the sort of person who was in prime position to comment on something anomalous or not anomalous in the sky. And it was, as I said, reportedly performing all sorts of weird maneuvers that would far exceed any sort of conventional or even unconventional aircraft that we're flying. I think the response to the encounter was more intriguing. A lot of the British media picked up on the fact that here was a credible observer, and I think this isn't in any way to denigrate your average UFO witness, because all testimony, if it's credible, is good testimony. But I think the British media particularly, their eyes were opened by the fact here was a trained pilot actually saying he saw something that he felt couldn't be explained in conventional terms. Since the reports come forward, some people have said, well, maybe the pilot did see something weird, but is it possible it was some sort of military test device? Which, in some cases, I don't dispute that is the case, that some UFOs probably are, classified military vehicles, and the further our technology advances, the harder it's going to become to differentiate between something we're building and a genuine UFO. But for me at least, I think the most important thing that this sighting has done is to really get the media's attention, and I think, a lot of people knock the media, and very often with good reason, because, they ridicule the subject, but sometimes like this, when their eyes are opened as well, we can actually use them to say, hey, something is going on, and here's a credible witness who can prove it to you.
Yeah, what I saw on that had a lot to do with, he'd been flying for 20 or 30 years, and when he first reported it, or when he first called it in, he was saying something like it was at least the size of another 737, but as soon as he thought about that, the first story I saw actually has a video report where that pilot was interviewed.
Okay.
He was saying it may be as much as, he saw it from 40 or 50 miles away from the air. He said he was very glad to get back down on the ground, and he hopes he never sees something like this again. They said he believed it could be as large as a mile wide. Did you read that?
Yeah, this was the interesting thing, is that in some cases, I saw this on one of the discussion boards I'm on, that somebody said, well, it almost harks back to the 50s and 60s with the accounts of things like motherships, which, you don't hear very much of today. Most UFO reports are of objects 30, 50 feet diameter or whatever. This thing was reportedly a huge object, and as you say, the guy, he wasn't someone who just achieved his pilot license in flying, small planes last week or something. He was an experienced pilot with a couple of decades of work and experience behind him flying jets. So, he was the perfect person to actually see this thing, and unfortunately he did.
And he was quite unnerved about it, too.
Oh, he was?
He said he's never seen anything like it.
No, a colleague of his who put forward the possibility that it maybe, or asked the question, could it have been some sort of military test device, said that he didn't dispute the fact that the witness saw something, because he saw how shook up and frightened the pilot had been for like an hour or so after the encounter when he landed and they met up. So that in itself, is a good gauge of character, the fact that one of his close friends saw him afterwards and the guy was just sort of dumbstruck.
Sure. With your experience in researching the field, would you consider it odd or unusual that, even though according to the pilot's testimony the thing was 40 or 50 miles, I guess offshore, does that sound even plausible that there's a mile-wide military test thing flying around where people might even see it?
Well, that's the thing
that must be a mile big.
Yeah, that's the thing that always, makes me question the man-made angle of the subject. As I said, I'm quite sure that, some prototype drone-type aircraft of a circular shape have been tested, maybe even some man-made ones that went beyond the so-called Avro car of the 50s, this circular thing that didn't really go anywhere. So I'm pretty sure that some UFOs are man-made, and I'm pretty sure as well that the military is quite happy for people to think these things are UFOs because it acts as a good cover. But in saying that, I don't believe for 1 minute that the military would be so recklessly stupid as to fly something a mile wide off the coast of England. If you're going to fly something that big, at least fly it in near Area 51 or whatever, where you've got plenty of desert and mountains and so on. Don't fly it off a country, Britain, which is smaller than the state of Texas, but you've got 60 million people living there, because everybody and his brother's going to see it.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense. That's the thing that I always come back to when people say, all the credible reports can be explained in man-made technology terms. I don't believe that, because it defies logic to fly these things where not just the public, but maybe, some journalist or photographer on his way home late one night from work happens to see the thing and photographs it. What's the logic in allowing, a potentially enemy nation to know that we're flying these things? It would be easier just to keep it secret if they're all test devices.
Yeah, it's a little crazy, a little unexplainable, and if you're listening to the show and this is the first you've heard of that, I do have one of the news stories linked currently. If you go down to the very, very bottom of livefromroswell.com, and I've got a couple things linked there right now. That is just one of the stories. If you go on, I don't mean to endorse one system over the other, but news.google.com and just type in UFO, and you'll begin to, Guernsey is one of the keywords you can use as well. But there's a second story I have linked there right now and this is something posted on UFO Digest that I'm thinking you would know about this too, Nick, is that the headline reads, is that the UN to debate contact with extraterrestrial civilizations. Just the first paragraph, and again, this link is on the bottom of livefromroswell.com. This could actually be kind of big. It definitely plays into the disclosure debate and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, the breaking story basically is that the UN may be considering or going ahead with a debate on the UFO subject. Now, this isn't the first time that the UN has had involvement in the subject. Back in the 70s, Prime Minister Eric Gary of Grenada also lobbied the United Nations to launch a study into the subject, and there's a lot of extensive paperwork now being declassified under the Freedom of Information Act on this earlier study. And, again, I come back to the thing that it's unfortunate that the UFO research community has to rely so much all the time on the media, rather than, us basically being able to weigh in ourselves, without having to, have this ridicule factor coming along. But I think that, things like the UN debate, that's the sort of thing that the media will pick up on. It will be difficult, again, to ridicule it in the same way with the pilot encounter. And I think this is one of the important things that's happening right now, is that things like the Chicago O'Hare airport encounter in late last year, things like that, collectively, and this new report and the UN issue, I think collectively it will turn the media's attention a little bit from just talking about little green men and, people who had, rolling out the pub on a Friday night at midnight or whatever, seeing UFOs, to, okay, well, here's pilots and here's government bodies debating the subject, and I think that will work in our favour collectively when it comes to trying to impress upon people that, hey, here's a genuine, valid subject that's worth looking into. And, if government agencies are looking into it, if the UN's looking into it, then there's obviously something to it. And I think it's things like that it's hard to dismiss. So, regardless of what happens with the UN debate, to what extent it goes ahead, what its conclusions and findings are, I think the fact that it's being discussed and lobbied is equally as important as of if it goes ahead or not.
Oh, definitely. You brought up something that I wanted to mention too, that this is not the first time the UN has tackled this issue. Even in this article it says for the first time in almost 27 years.
Yeah.
But what happened, I believe from when I was researching that a couple of years ago, Jacques Vallée was pretty prominent in discussing that with the UN, and the General Assembly agreed to look into the thing. There was a motion passed and everything, and then lo and behold, just a couple short weeks later, before any action got taken on this agreed upon, voted upon motion to investigate UFO reports, a little war breaks out, and somewhere that we might even say doesn't even really count, but it got the entire UN's attention away from the UFO topic for a while again. And I'm just curious, because I just almost want to predict from a conspiracy angle, is that, the UN will make a motion and a measure, and they'll start on something big, whether it's a conspiracy or just random or not, is very likely to happen to take their attention away from it again, to make sure that this doesn't get covered.
Yeah, I think unfortunately the reason why that works so well is because the influential media, unfortunately, is so quick to jump from one thing to another. A new story breaks, whether it's a planted story or not, and then they just forget about something else and move on to this, then move on to that. Or who Paris Hilton's dating this week or next week or the week after.
Actually, I've got plans with her.
Oh, good. Well, that may go in the next Celebrity Secrets edition, you never know.
Oh, God, I hope not. I hope not.
But, I think, that is the problem with the UFO subject. I think where we kind of are still lacking in the UFO research community is having a strong presence in the media, or that we can keep following up on and keep pumping out information to where, it can no longer be denied. And I think that's one of the areas that we kind of fall down on, is that we give the media these stories and then they put them out and just make fun of things. And we need a stronger presence, I think, in the mainstream media to take it seriously.
Good. What I'm kind of suggesting with that is that even if the media doesn't follow up on it, I'm thinking something huge like a war, terrorism, will come along and just happen to once again distract the UN from even following through with what we're talking about right now.
That would be unfortunate, because it could achieve a lot, in terms of bringing the profile of the subject higher, but maybe even uncovering some, significant material.
Well, for those who don't know, again, I mentioned earlier, you can go to our archive section of livefromroswell.com. And by the way, you can also email me if you have a question for Nick or for our upcoming guest, Bill Schneplin. Email is talktome, TALKTOME, at livefromroswell.com. But on of the most appropriate days of all, April 1st, Nick was with us already for an hour and a half discussing previous books that he's written, such as Body Snatchers in the Desert and On the Trail of the Saucer Spies, investigating government investigation of UFO researchers. What you've got going on right now is kind of in that same vein, but a little different too, right?
Yeah, the latest book I've got out, which came out about a month ago, Celebrity Secrets, is a study of government surveillance files on Hollywood stars, rock stars, pop stars, people like that, authors even. And so it's sort of like digging into the secret world of Hollywood, but not kind of like the TV scandal shows that, just relating the latest gossip, but specifically gossip and scandal that appeared in government files, people like the FBI, the CIA, the State Department, the Navy, who were watching various celebrities for all sorts of reasons. Some like Frank Sinatra that, are more well known because of their links with the mafia, or Marilyn Monroe with having affairs with the Kennedys. But even in some cases lesser well known, or I should say as equally well known celebrities, but less well known that they were being watched by the official world. People like Jimi Hendrix, Andy Warhol, Rock Hudson, John Wayne, Ernest Hemingway, Errol Flynn, Abbott and Costello even. So all sorts of people, the stars of the big screen and TV and the stage, and everybody and his brother in the official world's watching them.
That kind of brings up the question is, why would the FBI take such an interest in people that are more or less just Hollywood celebrities? They're just actors, they're not, or are they involved in all kinds of different things?
Well, there's some interesting little snippets of stories and information that explain the reasons why, and typically the reasons were sort of as varied as the allegations and claims that were being made. I mean, bizarrely, Abbott and Costello were being watched because...
That was my question. Why would Abbott and Costello be under FBI surveillance?
Abbott and Costello were being watched because, interestingly enough, between them, they possessed the biggest collection of porno movies in Hollywood. So like 1,500 films between the two of them. And at the time, there was a piece of legislation which was if you transport, as they called them, quote, obscene films through state by state, that was actually a crime. And they were being watched to see if they were interstate transport of, as they called it, obscene materials. But the file's pretty funny, really, and talks about how, the FBI would watch them when they go on tour and they'd hire hookers to come back to the hotel rooms and things like that. So.
Wow, I remember as a young child watching Abbott and Costello and then watching Abbott and Costello cartoons. So that was very targeted at children. I even saw a movie on there, or like an unofficial biography movie of their life. It took us all the way through the death of Costello, I believe.
Yeah. No, it's a bit
I would just never thought that of those guys. You totally shattered my image.
A bit different to the real story. But again, people like Rock Hudson, for example, the actor who died of AIDS in 1985. He lived a secret gay life that the world didn't know about. But the FBI's declassified files show that they did know as far back as the 50s, and the reason they watched him was because they heard rumours in the mid-60s that he was going to play an FBI agent. And J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI said, we can't have a gay actor playing one of our special agents. It wouldn't be good for our image. And so, you had this sort of stupid situation where the height of the Cold War, the Russians are the worst thing in the world at that particular time. Basically we're almost at war just after the Cuban Missile Crisis, and all they're really worrying about is whether or not Rock Hudson, a gay actor, is going to play one of their FBI agents. So again, you had this another weird reason why someone in the celebrity world was being watched. I think possibly the strangest file is the one on the Kingsmen, the band that recorded the song Louie Louie. And somebody contacted the FBI to say that they thought it had, quote again, obscene lyrics. And so the FBI got hold of the copies of the record.
Someone back in the day, Louis, that's 50s or 60s, right?
Yeah, late 50s, early 60s.
So a concerned American 50 years ago, 40, would actually, that was the first course of action. I think I heard a dirty lyric, I need to call the FBI.
That's exactly what happened. And,
oh.
and the FBI said, okay, we've got to look into this. So what they did, they went out, bought copies of the record, and circulated them amongst various people in the FBI's technical laboratory, who then sort of sat at their desk tapping the toes, trying to work out the lyrics to Louis, which were kind of sung in a unique way by the Kingsmen, which made it difficult to understand what they actually were singing. And so you had this sort of bizarre image of numerous FBI agents just hanging out all day, listening to Louis over and over again, just trying to work out if there was something that had freaked out some housewife in the Midwest.
That's good work.
Whether it was worth taking action. So.
Did they find anything?
No, they didn't find a thing.
Buy the book.
They didn't find a thing at all. So, but the fact that they even initiated the investigation, and this surreal imagery of them listening to it over and over again is kind of entertaining enough, I guess.
So is everybody like Eminem, 50 Cent, Red Hot Chili Peppers under investigation now? Do you think for this, or did they just have to let that go?
I think to an extent it would depend on who the person is. I mean, do I think there's a file on Britney Spears? No, I don't. Do I think there's one on the Dixie Chicks? I'm sure there is, because the whole thing with protesting against George Bush and the Gulf War. I'm sure there's one on them. I think it doesn't depend on whether you're a celebrity. It depends on who you're hanging out with. Are you hanging out with mafia bosses? Are you hanging out with members of the Communist Party and smoking pot? Things like that. It's when people have ties with other people, or potentially they're perceived as maybe being involved with organised crime, that sort of thing. But then you find that the more they dig into the celebrity life of the person, it goes off at an angle that's what started as something, as an investigation into mafia links, might turn out to be something else as well. Because a lot of these people live interesting lives. So, as I said, there's chapters on Andy Warhol, Jimi Hendrix, Elvis Presley, Frank Sinatra, the Kingsmen, Errol Flynn, John Lennon, even John Denver, who comes from Roswell. Yeah. Born in Roswell. He was being watched by the FBI for a while.
We don't let that info out very often. I'd appreciate it you not mentioning that again on the air. John Denver's from Roswell.
So you've got a good range of a lot of sort of protest-type rock bands like the Sex Pistols and the MC5, who were speaking about political issues. They were watched very closely as well. So it wasn't just Hollywood stars; it was people in the rock world too.
Who's the most current? Well, we're running a little low on time. I was going to ask you two questions. Who's the most current person in the book, you would say? And also, I know you will be in Roswell this summer. Tell us a little bit about what you're going to be talking about in the last closing minutes.
Okay. Well, I guess the most up-to-date recent thing would be the material on Princess Diana, which I've tried to get hold of. The National Security Agency, CIA, Defense Intelligence Agency have all said they've got files on her, but none of them will release them. I included her, although she sort of was British royalty, she was also a celebrity figure too. Mm-hmm. So I pointed out the fact that in her case it's a little bit different in the sense that we know files exist, but the government won't let us see them, whereas the other cases in the book, they have let us see them. So that's, I guess, the most up-to-date one. And when I come to Roswell for your conference this July, I'll be speaking on two of my books, one on the Trail of the Source Spies, which is a study of the way in which government agencies have secretly spied on people in the subject for years. Contactees, abductees, researchers, authors, lecturers, anyone pretty much and everyone who's delved into the UFO subject at some point has been subject of official investigations. And I'll be presenting copies of some of the original files that I got declassified, like the 300-page George Van Tassel contactee file and George Adamski's 100-page FBI surveillance file. And I'll also be speaking about my Body Snatchers in the Desert book, which discusses a theory, or testimony, I should say, from 5 or 6 people I interviewed who said that the Roswell story was connected with classified high-altitude balloon experiments using prisoners of war and handicapped people and all sorts of things in controversial, dark, high-altitude experiments in the New Mexico desert.
That's gruesome.
So, you know, it's one of these things where it got a lot of controversy and debate when the book came out, but, you know, I feel that if there's a story out there and people are telling it, then we need to get all the angles out to try and resolve what did or didn't happen at Roswell. You know, people have asked me, could it be disinformation or could it be true? I said, you know, it could be a combination of several things. We just don't know. But I think just by hiding it and putting it away in a filing cabinet achieves nothing. You know, we need to get all the information out, regardless of whether it sits well with preconceived beliefs or not, because, you know, that is the only way we're going to get answers, is by debating every theory, every angle, and just chasing every lead down, you know, to try and resolve, if possible, this story. So.
I got to agree with you. That's why I'm proud to have you here. Okay. Folks, we're going to take a break here. We're going out with the music, I believe, of The Antibodies, my MySpace Featured Artist of the Week. You can find out more at nickredfern.com about Nick's books, and you can also check out RoswellUFOFestival.com to plan your trip around hearing him lecture. Sorry, this was a short trip today, Nick. Short trip down UFO lane.
Not a problem.
But we hope to have you back soon, and I appreciate you coming on. Folks, we're going into break, so return to livefromroswell.com in just a few minutes.
Thanks, Scott.
Senses make no sense, no matter the consequence. Take your religion, sex and dreams, live where you gotta, so it seems. And the senses make no sense, no matter the consequence. I make of it what I need tonight. Make of it what I need tonight. She reached out and took my hand, smiled and turned away again. And the senses make no sense, nah, the reasons make no sense. The sun finds me awake, and we talk incessantly. And the senses make no sense, no matter the consequence. I make of it what I need tonight. Make of it what I need tonight. It hasn't been easy. It hasn't been easy. It hasn't been easy. For a second I thought I saw a rainbow in your eyes, but the senses make no sense. Nah, the senses make no sense. Out of the blue, how unfamiliar this all feels to me. And the senses make no sense, no matter the consequence. Take only what you need tonight. Take only what you need tonight. Take only what you need.
Tune in to UFO Undercover, Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern, with your host, Joe Montaldo, right here on the Paranormal Radio Network.
The Unabridged Universe. Join us from 7 to 9 Central Standard Time, Saturdays, as host Jason Wilson and I, Victoria Rose, bring you the perspectives of guests on every topic, from extraterrestrials on the edge of the galaxy to issues that affect you right here at home. It's a big universe out there, and we're likely to cover anything. Do you have any topics that you'd like to have discussed? Know any researchers or free thinkers out there you'd like to have on the show? Log on to www.unabridgeduniverse.com and let us know, only on the Paranormal Radio Network.
Light up your night with The Kevin Smith Show. Hi, this is Kevin Smith. Join me Monday through Friday right here on the Paranormal Radio Network.
Hi, this is James Afianchik, the Black Knight of Talk Radio, inviting you to join me on the road to truth via the path of non-contradiction. Join us each week on Feet to the Fire, a show with the goals of examining a subject matter on its own merits and test how it stands up to the many possibilities found in reality. All without pre-drawn conclusions found in personal bias. No left or right wings here. No pounding the pulpit of ego-driven my way or the highway attitudes. But there are no free passes given either. Answers to questions are important, but equally important is the reasons and methods used to find the answer. The lack of contradiction is the final judge here on Feet to the Fire. Sunday evenings. How do you listen? www.feet2fire.com for more information.
This land is your land. This land.
Join host Basima Farak on The People Speak as she interviews guests from the realm of politics, activism, spirituality, science, and entertainment. That's Tuesdays from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern on The People Speak, an audience interactive program where your voice counts.
This land is made for you.
Won't you stand up for truth? Won't you turn away to?
Get your dose of truth with the Truth Hurts Radio Show with your host Charles Giuliani, Mondays, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern. The Truth Hurts. Ignorance kills.
Welcome back to Live from Roswell with your host Guy Malone on the Paranormal Radio Network.
Joe always steals my thunder when he does that. I am Guy Malone, as he said, and I'm here to welcome you back to Live from Roswell. It's livefromroswell.com if you'd like to check out our site on the internet. Get bios of our previous guest, Nick Redfern, who's just on discussing his new book, Celebrity Secrets, an in-depth investigation of FBI files related to some of your favorite celebrities, Marilyn Monroe, Elvis Presley, and in case you weren't with us, even Abbott and Costello had an FBI file because of their activities. If you scroll down on livefromroswell.com right now, I have a link to Nick's new book, Celebrity Secrets. It'll take you right into Amazon. It's brand new, but it's already selling used. You can get it for half price there if you follow that link. And you can also check out nickredfern.com. Coming up in just a moment here, we have William, a.k.a. Bill Sneblin. He's an occult researcher, and he's not just a researcher. He spent several decades in various forms of occultism, including Satanism, Masonry, vampirism, and he's also pretty well known as a UFO researcher. He has spoken on the topic of UFOs in many, many venues. So it's a little bit of a different show for you today. You know, I may be wed to one view on my own, but I also have people with very different views. So depending on your view of Roswell, even Nick, when he was here, we're discussing the man-made view of Roswell, which is one of his books. And Bill Sneblin is going to be no exception to some of the more alternative or different types of people we get on the show. But they're all people that are very well researched. And I'll remind you again, because I saw people in the virtual auditorium really like that song we had during the break, that is the Antibodies. And they are linked on livefromroswell.com right now. They are my MySpace Featured Artist of the Week. If you like what you heard, you can click through to their site and hear like 4 more of their songs on their MySpace site. Bill, you don't have a MySpace site, do you?
No, I'm just not with the program. Sorry. Although I am told, I didn't do it, I am told that many of my videos are now on Google, the tube version of Google. As free downloads or free, you can watch a lot of my videos on Google.
That's true. I searched your name myself just the other day, and I saw that you did a very extensive, we'll just go ahead and plug it now and discuss it as far as your background. You did a very extensive, I believe, 9 DVD interview series called Interview with an Ex-Vampire.
That's
with
right.
Stephanie Rell. And
Yes.
for those who like to surf Google video, you can watch part 1 of that online the last time I looked.
I think that's true, yes.
Yeah, that's worth jumping right into saying. What what qualifies you to do a long video, a DVD series titled "Interview with an Ex-Vampire"?
Well, probably the fact that I actually am an ex-vampire, and I'm sure that will blow away a lot of your listeners right there, but I was involved in the occult, the supernatural, witchcraft, black magic, Satanism, and ultimately I was involved with a cult group that their sacramental system involved drinking human blood. And it was my belief at that time, which of course was very twisted by the devil, that by doing this I could literally live forever. That just not quite like the vampires in the movies where you turn into a bat or turn into mist and float under a door or things like that, but that you could exist as a immortal being, walking the earth for centuries. And that was the promise that I was given by the people who were in this group, which was part of the larger group of Satanists. And I was involved in that for several years, and I don't know how far you want to get into that right now, but we can talk about that at some length, or we can get back to it later.
Well, there's an obvious question when you mentioned drinking human blood. Was that just blood out of a cup that people within the system, you might say, donated themselves, or were there dirtier means of obtaining the blood?
Well, semi-dirtier. Let's just say this. I had a network of covens that I and my wife had under us, which was fairly substantial by this time. I mean, I personally had initiated 175 women into witchcraft. And some of those more advanced students, who were themselves high priestesses, were more than willing to let me bite them in the neck and drain their blood to a degree. I didn't kill them, and I just took enough, and there was like a kind of a round robin of them, where one night one woman would do it, another night another woman would do it, and so on, so that no single woman ever got, drained enough that she was in any kind of danger. But that was basically how I kept alive, at least for a long time, because I was essentially, the other thing I did was every day, I was an ordained priest in the old Catholic Church, and every day I would celebrate a Mass. And of course, if you understand Catholic doctrine, the concept is that the bread changes literally into the body of Jesus, and the blood changes literally, the wine changes into the blood of Jesus. And so they believe that when you drink that goblet, you're drinking the entire 9 quarts that were in the body of Jesus, of blood. And so every day I would celebrate a Mass, and that would also help me get through the day. So I was essentially living on communion wafers, communion wine, and human blood for 1.5 to 2 years.
That's all you ate?
Yeah.
Drank?
And I, believe it or not, I looked a little pretty much like I do now. I was not like you see on TV, these lean, gaunt-looking vampires. I mean, I actually never lost any weight on it. So it's I'm not promoting
so
it.
as a guy who's interested in losing weight myself, you don't recommend the blood and communion wafers diet?
No, not at all. Plus the fact that the Bible repeatedly says don't drink blood, both testaments is also kind of a bad thing, to put in there. But yeah, it's not something you want to do. And I was, like so many of the things the devil offers us, I was led to believe that this would be a path to immortality, that I would have all this strength and all of this occult power. And to a degree, there was some little bit of truth in that. Of course, I have no way of knowing if I would have, quote unquote, lived forever or not. But I do know that it was a pretty miserable existence. I mean, that's a pretty monotonous diet when you think about it. I mean, and I still wanted food, and I couldn't eat it. I couldn't even drink water. If I drank glass of water, I would throw it up. If I tried to eat food, I would throw it up. And so the only 2 things I could eat would be communion wafers and human blood, and of course the wine. And it got pretty, and of course to never see the sun. I had to get a 3rd shift job with the Milwaukee Sentinel at that time. That was like the morning newspaper, and so I was out every night putting newspapers in boxes, how they do for a major urban newspaper. And I never got to see a sunrise or a sunset. I literally had to stay in a coffin, which I had to build according to certain specifications. We talk all about that in the video. There's a certain way that a true vampire has to do. You can't just go down to your local, funeral place and pick up a coffin, it's got to be made according to certain occult specifications. And I tell you, it was not a good way to live, and that's why when I got liberated from it, which was the first step on my path back to God, I mean, I was very grateful that I no longer had to live that life. See, looking outside at it, it looks very romantic, because all the chicks like it, stuff like that. And, because it's very erotic. I mean, and of course, since I got out of it, it's become even more erotic because, of course, we had that Interview with Vampire movie come out with Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise, who were, like the two big hunks back then. And so now it's really, it's become much more popular since the early 90s. I think that movie came out like in 94 or 95. And now if you get on the Internet, you'll find all kinds of, vampire churches, Temple of the Vampires, just it's almost as many things. And they're white out in the open. When I was into this was a very much underground thing. Nobody knew about it. And nowadays, it's pretty much in your face.
I was a little curious about that. I was going to ask you how widespread do you think the practice of vampirism and drinking blood is. You sort of answered it, but it was underground. Like, when you say, are there even 100,000 or 500,000 people, do you think, involved in this right now?
I think there may be, and I mean, in terms of like in North America, there might be that many if you count the wannabes. I mean, the people that, that they go and they take a razor or a little, scalpel and slit each other's wrists and drink a little blood, and it's like a rush for them. But they aren't true initiates. They're just what we used to call wannabes. If you go on these sites, you'll find they actually will. They have a taxonomy. They have a classification. They talk about psychic vampires, and that's how you start out. And that's where you just suck the energy out of people. And you know people like that. We all do. I mean,
I've used that phrase myself, not realizing it was an actual term you would use as a former occultist.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's people, they walk into a room and they just sort of suck the life out of the room, and that's I'm not saying all those people are knowingly practicing psychic vampirism.
Right. That was my question. Are they doing it on purpose?
Some of them are just like a dysfunctional method of coping, or if you know people like who, it seems like they thrive on starting conflicts, and then they feed on the energy from people getting angry at them or angry at each other. They'll literally sow seeds of discord, and then they'll feed off the energy of all that anger and all that rage and all the fighting and cussing and whatever that happens from that. It's demonic, And I'm not saying again that everyone who does that is necessarily a knowingly doing it. Some of them just do it because they feel like that's the only way they can live. Mm-hmm. And then if you go on these modern day vampire websites, the term they've come up with now is a sanguinarian. The sanguinarian is a vampire that actually drinks human blood. And even then, they talk about different degrees of that. There's some people that just drink blood as a rush, kind of like you might have a martini with your dinner, but they still eat normal food. And then there's people that are moving in the direction where I was, that are actually living mostly or almost entirely on human blood. So
you say there's even 100 people like that in North America, or?
Oh, I'm sure there's thousands.
Oh wow, that's amazing.
Literally, because when I was involved, and I was told every major city had at least one or two, and that was like nearly 30 years ago. And this stuff is spread, especially because of the media. I mean, when I was into it, there'd never been like a vampire hero on a TV show. Of course. And we had the TV Angel, where he was like a sort of an anti-hero vampire. And I take that back. There was Barnabas Collins on Dark Shadows, but am I really dating myself then? But, I mean, the point is nowadays it's much more mainstream.
Yeah, I remember reading the Anne Rice books as they came out. Interview with the Vampire, of course, was kind of a sleeper hit, and I managed to get a hold of that in my college days. And then Lestat, which is actually a fine piece of literature, I've always thought. I've read that more than once. But I remember in the 80s, when the third book in that series came out, Queen of the Damned, that her book debuted at #1 hardback on the New York Times bestseller list.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Because, see, there's a certain dark Gothic romanticism to all that. And anyway, it is something that's very, very appealing to a lot of people. Of course, it's sort of a subset of the goth culture that's common among young people. You know, there's goth kids that they just, you know, wear black makeup and black leather and, you know, put a silver spike through their nose or something like that, and they just do it just to creep people out and whatever. But then there's also goth young people and not so young people that actually subscribe to vampirism, and they actually will drink each other's blood. And there are actually vampire nightclubs in Los Angeles.
Oh, there really are. That's not
there really are
television,
yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, not just on TV. And I mean, they're not easy to find, but they actually will serve you a Bloody Mary that's got real blood in it and stuff like that. And I mean, this is and especially in the days of all these diseases and of course HIV, which thankfully that wasn't around when I was one. I mean, oddly enough, the Lord got me out of that just about the time that first became a concern, because, you know, obviously being a vampire in the age of AIDS is a whole lot different than it would have been back then.
Sure. I've got a couple comments from our virtual auditorium, and folks, if you're interested in this topic, we'll move off of vampirism pretty quickly here, but you can still email me, talk to me at livefromroswell.com to pose any questions to Bill Sneblin. And from the people we have in our virtual auditorium, I've got two comments. One person in New Orleans says that there are a few of those clubs in New Orleans also, which kind of makes sense. But someone else
isn't that Anne Rice's hometown or something?
Someone else is mentioning, and I don't know if you can verify this, someone says that I heard Al Gore liked to drink blood. Any truth to that?
Well, frankly, I don't think Al Gore has enough life in him to be a vampire. But, yeah, that's a common thing you hear among people that dislike Al Gore, and I don't know that that's true. It could be, but I could neither confirm or deny that. I've never met him, and, you know, it's possible, though. Someone asked me if they'd heard that he'd had actually a vial of human blood around his neck, and that he'd take a swig from it every now and then when he needs a little pick-me-up. And you never know. I mean, some of these politicians, and unfortunately it's both parties, are really into some very bizarre stuff because they believe it will help prolong their lives. They believe it will get them more political power, more political clout. So, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me, but I certainly can't confirm it, no.
Mm-hmm. And that may be skull and bones related, too, is what Dave Pack is mentioning.
Mm-hmm.
But, okay, I was just kind of curious. So at least you have heard that rumor, too, but you can't confirm or deny, and we're definitely not making any claims here on the program.
Oh, heaven,
that Al Gore drinks blood, and you're not saying that either.
No.
That's pretty interesting. You've mentioned a couple. I will tell people, if you go on livefromroswell.com right now, still up at the top of the screen there, I do have a banner link, and it just says Interview with an Ex-Vampire. And it takes you into the interview series on DVD that Stephanie Ralph performed with yourself, with Bill Sneblin, where he goes into extensive detail probably about the history. She probably prepared for the interview, knowing you're doing a DVD taping, and probably asked a host of questions, right?
Well, yeah, in fact, I would have to say that it's about much more than vampirism. I mean, if you see it's 9 hours long. And
right.
If you see all 9 hours, she kind of saved the best, quote-unquote, till last. But there's material in there on Mormonism, there's material in there on Masonry, there's material in on witchcraft, black magic, Satanism, and the whole vampire cultist. Because there's actually a vampire religion with its own Christ, its own method of salvation, its own eschatology, if you will. It's as full-bodied and as full-blown as, except of course it's not large by comparison to, say, you know, the Baptists or the Lutherans, but it's a significant thing in our society, and they have a real vision, and they have a real concept for what they believe that mission is and how they need to go about doing things. So it's a real thing.
Okay, so there it is, folks, for you. And especially much of this interview series you're discussing is autobiographical. It's not just research. It's a lot of your personal experiences through Mormonism, Satanism, vampirism, etc. And Masonry, you said, right?
Yes.
Yeah, livefromroswell.com, folks. You'll see there's just a nice, obvious banner to his interview series that Stephanie Ralph performed a while back on Interview with an Ex-Vampire. But you've mentioned a couple times already that you used to do that, or that the Lord got you out of it, and such like that. Before we go on break in about 5 minutes, do you want to give just a short story testimony? Because I will say one thing about Bill. I've met him. He's been here in Roswell. We've done some lectures with him. But compared to most of the Christians you know, he just does not fit the bill or your preconceived notions. You're a little different in quite a few ways that we might discuss after we come back.
Yeah, well, okay. Well, all of the things I just mentioned that I talk about on this DVD, I have been involved in. I between the period of when I was in my late teens until 34 years old or so, I had been involved in many, many false religious systems. And the last stop on that journey was Mormonism. And as many of you know, Mormons are really, really nice people, but they're lost. They're not believers. And they have
believers in what? They're not believers in what?
In Christianity. They say they are Christians, but yet they have another plan of salvation. They have another gospel, another Jesus. Like, just as an example, Mormons believe that Jesus is not Almighty God. They believe that he is just a God, that he's the spirit brother of Lucifer, and that he is not Lord. They will never call him Lord, because they believe only the Father is God. But yet, paradoxically, they believe that they themselves can become gods. Now, obviously, if you are a Christian, you understand that is way far out of the pale of Christian orthodoxy. And that's why, although I don't know how political we want to get here, but Mitt Romney in his candidacy, although I don't think it seems to be going very far, but I would be very, very worried about having a Mormon president, because the Mormons have their own weird plan for America, which is not very friendly to anybody that disagrees with them. If you want, we can talk more about that after the break. But in any event,
well, we're not politically one way or the other. We're just, as long as it's G-rated, you're welcome to state your
opinion. Oh, well, no, it's plenty G-rated. But anyhow, the Lord used Mormonism, and I'm making a very long story very short, to get me to a place where I realized I was a sinner, because Mormons are good people. They try to live by Christian values, and I found that I couldn't do it. With my background, I mean, because if you've had a background of drugs and sex and orgies and blood drinking and all of that, it's kind of hard to just all of a sudden stop all that in your own power and try to live a good, straight Christian life. And so the Lord used Mormonism to show me that I was a sinner. And I became an elders quorum president. I had several high-level positions within the local church. Went to the temple, had a temple recommend, but I was struggling. And I was struggling also because I saw that there were like dozens of Mormons in the church around me that just weren't making it, that were floundering, that could not live up to even the most basic standards of Christianity. And I think because Mormons have like thousands of commandments you have to keep, not just the 613 that are in the Torah. They had thousands of commandments you had to keep, and nobody can do it. It was like Pharisaism run rampant. And so finally one day, I came home from doing home teaching, which is a thing that Mormons do, where the priesthood people go out and visit all the people in the church once a month to see how they're doing. And I opened my Bible, and there was a passage there from Matthew 11 that talked about how Jesus' yoke was easy and his burden was light. And then a little voice in my head, and I wasn't that familiar with the Bible, told me, go to Matthew 23. So I turned to Matthew 23, and there on verse 4 it said, of the Pharisees, for they bind heavy burdens and grievously to be borne, and do not lift a finger to help them. And I felt like that was a real convicting thing for me. So from that, and again, truncating a lot of stuff, within about a year and a half, I'd kind of studied my way by reading the Bible out of Mormonism. I knelt at the foot of my bed finally and took off my magic Mormon underwear, and from the back of a Christian comic book, I prayed the sinner's prayer, and I gave my life to Jesus, to Yeshua, as I prefer to call him by his Hebrew name. And
his friends call him Yeshua, I've heard.
Pardon me?
His friends call him Yeshua.
Yes, I think they did. I don't think the name Jesus even existed in the first century. So anyway, and he gloriously set me free. And I was set free from cocaine addiction, from blood addiction. I'll tell you, blood addiction is worse than cocaine, because I've done them both. And I was set gloriously free, and then a couple years later he called me into the ministry. And in 1986, I was out in Salt Lake City giving a talk, which sort of put me on the map. It was called Joseph Smith and the Temple of Doom. And the rest, as they say,
You're a ham.
is history.
Huh? You're a ham.
Yeah,
in one word, we're gonna cut a break. How long ago was that? You say you were set free and your life changed. How long ago?
1984 was when I was born again.
Okay, wow. We'll be back very shortly, folks, with Bill William, a.k.a. Bill Schneblin. And some of what we're going to talk about, he's the author of several books as well, almost as many as our previous guest, Nick Redfern. But they are linked right now on livefromroswell.com. But we're going to take you through a little history of Bill's books, Lucifer Dethroned, which is autobiographical, Blood on the Doorpost, Spiritual Warfare, Masonry, Beyond the Light, and With Us, Satan's Little White Lie. And we certainly will not ignore the UFO topic because one of Bill's better-selling books is called Space Invaders. So, and if you have questions, you can email me at talktome@livefromroswell.com, and I will pose your question to Bill, and he'll answer it on the air for you. And I believe, we're going to take again, my MySpace featured artist of the week is the Antibodies. They're about to take us out of here. So please return after this break, folks.
Some look for a one-night stand while others look for love. Just be careful of the things you do, cause it just might do you in. Might look real good to you, a real life paradise. You better dress right for a dangerous time if you're gonna ride in a suicide slide. Times have changed and you can't seem to see things that'll put you in an early grave. And think twice if you want a long life, might pay you to abstain. Might look real good to you, a real life paradise. Better dress right for a dangerous time if you wanna ride in a suicide slide. Might look real good to you, a real life paradise. You better dress right for a dangerous time if you wanna ride in a suicide slide. False courage with a few strong drinks won't let you clearly think. Good time can have a terrible price, force you to explain. I might look real good to you, a real life paradise. You better dress right for a dangerous time if you wanna ride on a suicide slide.
Tune in to UFO Undercover, Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern, with your host, Joe Montaldo, right here on the Paranormal Radio Network.
The Unabridged Universe. Join us from 7 to 9 Central Standard Time, Saturdays as host Jason Wilson and I, Victoria Rose, bring you the perspectives of guests on every topic, from extraterrestrials on the edge of the galaxy to issues that affect you right here at home. It's a big universe out there, and we're likely to cover anything. Do you have any topics that you'd like to have discussed? Know any researchers or free thinkers out there you'd like to have on the show? Log on to www.unabridgeduniverse.com and let us know, only on the Paranormal Radio Network.
Light up your night with The Kevin Smith Show. Hi, this is Kevin Smith. Join me Monday through Friday right here on the Paranormal Radio Network.
Do you like to ask questions about everything? Would you like to escape from your proverbial box? Just leap out and explore our world in ways you've never imagined? You can have that opportunity. As we grow and expand, new features will be added, allowing you to experience radio programming at a fresh new level. I invite you to join me, November Hansen, host of Voice of the People. Together, we can expand our horizons and peer into multifaceted possibilities. This program will broadcast live Saturday evenings on the Paranormal Radio Network.
Hi, this is James Arthur Yanchik, the Black Knight of Talk Radio, inviting you to join me on the road to truth via the path of non-contradiction. Join us each week on Feet to the Fire, a show with the goals of examining a subject matter on its own merits and test how it stands up to the many possibilities found in reality. All without pre-drawn conclusions found in personal bias. No left or right wings here. No pounding the pulpit of ego-driven my way or the highway attitudes. But there are no free passes given either. Answers to questions are important, but equally important is the reasons and methods used to find the answer. The lack of contradiction is the final judge here on Feet to the Fire. Feet. Sunday evenings. How do you listen? www.feet2fire.com for more information.
This land is your land. This land.
Join host Basima Farhat on The People Speak as she interviews guests from the realm of politics, activism, spirituality, science, and entertainment. That's Tuesdays from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern on The People Speak, an audience interactive program where your voice counts.
This land was made.
What would you do if you knew all the things we know? Would you stand up for truth? Or would you turn away to?
Get your dose of truth with the Truth Hurts radio show with your host Charles Giuliani, Mondays, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern. The Truth Hurts. Ignorance kills.
What would you do if you?
Welcome back to Live from Roswell with your host, Guy Malone, on the Paranormal Radio Network.
Yes, welcome back. This is Guy Malone. You're listening to livefromroswell.com, the only internet radio program broadcast to you live from usually sunny and clearing up Roswell, New Mexico. We just had a 4-minute commercial break. You heard music from the Antibodies, my MySpace featured artist of the week. You can check them out. Let me give you just a couple programming notes before we bring back our guest, Bill Sneblin. Is that this show does solicit sponsors. You can have your commercial played on our radio program anytime you like. At the top of livefromroswell.com, there is a link underneath the banner that's posted right now where you can find out about banner advertising, and you can also find out about having your commercial played live on the show. You'll see in our archives I do have a banner up for Conspiracy Clothes right now. They're not a paid sponsor, but he's sending me some really cool T-shirts. So I would encourage you to check out, especially if you're a conspiracist or a 911er and such like that. The shirt he's sending me says the government is trying to kill me, and it's all about fluoride being in the water. I found out just from his site that the United States is the only country that still approves fluoride being in our water. No other country wants it because it's allegedly very bad for you. But there's a link to Conspiracy Clothes on the archives page of livefromroswell.com. Speaking of T-shirts, it just occurred to me this week that I know we have literally thousands of listeners in Australia that always shows up on our stats. So happy Monday morning to those of you joining us in Australia. I believe it's about 5 in the morning if you're in Melbourne. But the idea of T-shirts came to me because I sort of mentioned jokingly with Bill, as a guy interested in losing weight, he told me he does not recommend the blood diet. But I have been losing some weight, and just in the last couple months I've joined a gym. So I want to make an offer to our Australian listeners that you won't hear on probably any other radio program, is that I need more T-shirts because I go to the gym pretty regularly and get them just a little bit sweaty. And I love location T-shirts. So if you are in Australia, if you want to send a T-shirt to the address at the bottom of livefromroswell.com that just says Sydney, Melbourne, or whatever location you're from, I don't even care if it's a used T-shirt. It's just something I'm going to wear to the gym anyway. I will, in return, include your mailing address if you send me a T-shirt. We'll just see what kind of response I get off this. We will mail you a UFOs 101 DVD, which is also linked from my livefromroswell.com website. We'll send it back to you. It won't be a promotional consideration. There'll be no money changing hands here, but I love souvenirs, and I've never been to Australia, even though I totally intend to. But send me some T-shirts at the address listed at the bottom of livefromroswell.com. We'll send you a new DVD as well in return for that. And this isn't exactly a programming note, but I just wanted to share something really cool with you. At least I think it's cool. My main website, alienstranger.com, is I've got a new photo up there that was taken by photographer Matt Hoyle. Matt actually lives in Australia, I believe. He works in New York and Los Angeles very regularly, though. He gets $10,000 a day for his commercial photography. But he was creating a book of his own called Encounters, traveling the United States. And he came and asked permission to do a photo of me. And from what I can tell, I'm going to be included in that book. But if you want to see the coolest professional shot I've personally ever seen of me in my makeup, be sure to hit up alienstranger.com sometime today. And that photo is just plain eerie. Okay, enough of my blather. Happy Sunday to those of us that are just joining us in the North America. Happy Monday if you're on the other side of the globe. Welcome back, Bill Sneblin. You are still with us, right, Bill?
Oh, you bet.
Okay, I haven't bored you to tears with my top-of-the-hour blither blather then.
No, not at all. But I'd like to say hello to all your friends down in Australia because I was down there ministering about 9 years ago, and it's a great, great country. And if you ever want to have me come back, I'm more than willing to do it.
Oh, right on. Yeah, I would love to. I'll respond to any invitation for travel to Australia, whether it's to speak or just hang out. During the break, we have a virtual auditorium that people can access, and it's people exchanging some comments on the names that I'm sure you may have something to say about. Sir Francis Bacon came up, for instance, as well as, I think, Ed Kelly. I have to scroll up a little too high for that. Are those names that you're familiar with? John Dee was one of them, Queen Elizabeth,
Dr. John Dee,
astrologer,
and Edward Kelly. Sure.
You know anything about those guys in 67?
Well, yes. Dr. John Dee lived in the Elizabethan era, and he was an advisor to the Queen. And he was also probably the greatest sorcerer of his period. And he is responsible for what has come to be known as the Enochian system of magic, which is a very, very complex, it's a whole other language, it's a whole another system than what is normally thought of as Western ceremonial magic. And he did this by having this Edward Kelly, who was an associate of his who claimed to be a medium. He would go into trance, and this angel would speak to him, through him rather, and give him this language and all these different, like there's cubes and symbols and sigils and calls, and it's extremely complicated. But this has been so influential down through the centuries that even to this day, and you know, like when the Satanic Bible was first printed in 1966 and is still being printed today, the Enochian calls comprise the last third of the book because they are so powerful a magical tool to open up the doorway into the infernal kingdom. And this fellow was an advisor to Queen Elizabeth I, and he was probably also the mentor of Sir Francis Bacon. And you also mentioned that name. So Bacon is felt to have been the architect behind the idea of America being the new Atlantis. And here's another shameless plug, I appeared prominently in a couple of, now there's 2 out, different DVDs that are called The Secret Beginnings of America's Origins, or The Secret Mysteries of America's Beginnings, I think. And the first one talked about the new Atlantis. The new one that's out is called Riddles in Stone. And they both address the fact that when America was just being formed and being discovered, that Francis Bacon was behind a lot of the initial concepts that went into American thought, went into American architecture, the whole bit. And it's a really fascinating study because it shows how even though you'll hear from most Christians that America, oh, it's a Christian nation, it was started as a Christian nation. No, not according to Bacon. Well, it's not to say that there weren't many good, staunch Christian people in America in the days of the colonies, but Bacon also had his people over here who were esotericists, they were Freemasons, they were Rosicrucians, and they had an entirely separate agenda. So even from its beginning, America struggled. Like I tell people, it's like Esau and Jacob in the womb, struggling as to who was going to be on top. And that struggle is still going on to this very day.
What was their agenda then? You said they had a totally different agenda.
Well, they wanted to create, they knew this was virgin territory, if you will, if you assume you're going to get rid of all the Indians. And so they wanted to come in here and create a occult theocracy where it would be like Atlantis was. You see that Atlantis is this fabled lost continent, which everybody knows that's where the UFO originally came from, right? And they supposedly had a kingdom that was ruled over by wise philosopher, sorcerer, magician type people. And that's what they wanted the New World to be. They wanted to be a place where you could freely practice occult things, all these different occult disciplines without fear of persecution. And of course, at the same time, Christians like the Pilgrims and the Puritans and Roger Williams and the Baptists and some of these other people were also coming over here. They also wanted freedom of religion and freedom from persecution of their faith. And so, from the very beginning, there was a struggle between these two ideologies, and that's why you have among our founding fathers people like, Jefferson, who was an occultist and a deist and a Rosicrucian, and you also have people like Washington and John Adams who were solid Christians, going back and forth. And of course then there's the whole Freemasonic component of the thing, which is another entire discussion. But it is basically a struggle between the philosophy of Bacon and his gang, which is more or less the philosophy of the Illuminati, universalism, all religions are good, all religions are the same, all paths to God are the same. And then Christianity, of course, which makes this unique claim that says that only through Yeshua, only through Jesus Christ, can you attain heaven. So that's a big, huge divide between those two positions. They both obviously cannot be true. And the interesting thing is, and we document this in a DVD, that if you live in Pennsylvania, go to Ephrata, Pennsylvania, you will find there's something called the Ephrata Cloister. And while they kind of cover up what it was, they claim it was populated by Seventh-day Baptists that came over here from Germany way back in the 1600s. Actually, they were Rosicrucians. And the Ephrata Cloister, which is one of the oldest things of kind in the New World, was actually started by Rosicrucians from Germany who claimed to be Christians, and yet they were teaching esoteric doctrines. And that's a very good illustration. Now, right from the first, Satan planted his flag at the same time as the pilgrims were landing and praying and thanking God for bringing them safely to the New World.
You said you talk about that on a DVD. Which DVD is that?
That is the DVD. It's I have trouble with the title, but it's The New Atlantis is the subtitle, and I think it's The Secret Mysteries of America's Beginnings. And we have it on our website. It's really, in fact, it won the New York Film Festival Award for Best Documentary last year.
Oh, wow.
So it's really, you look at it, you think you're seeing something on the History Channel. It's that well done, and I am one of the people that are interviewed as being experts in this stuff on it.
Before we get into some of your books, I'm going to pitch you a couple of comments that I've noticed in the virtual auditorium over the last half an hour since you've been on the show. Is that for those who don't know or didn't catch the bio, you can see our guest Bill Heflin. His bio is listed on livefromroswell.com, as well as a link to his official site. He has a couple of decades. You would say he's an occult expert because he has a couple decades of practice in ritual magic, Satanism, vampirism, etc. And he's now, since 1984, he is also a practicing Christian minister, but not so much Christian in the way that fits the bill of what you're used to. So just as far as your background, I see a comment here from Josh that I'll just ask your response to. It says, magic in and of itself is basically neutral. It is the intent of the user that makes it good or bad. Well, how much you reply to
Well, that's a common thing, and I used to see that myself when I taught magic with a K, as we say. M-A-G-I-C-K is how ceremonial magicians spell the word. And the problem with that is that may be this gentleman's opinion, but it's not God's opinion. Because in the Bible, he refers to magic and sorcery as abominable, which is just about the worst word you can think of to describe something. It's detestable in his sight. And it was so evil that in those days in the Old Testament, if someone was caught practicing it, it was the death penalty. So God really felt that this, and I don't think he's changed his mind, in the last 2,000 years, because the New Testament also contains condemnations. It says, for example, in the book of Revelations, that neither sorcery, those who practice sorcery, nor witchcraft will ever enter the kingdom of heaven unless they repent. So even though the common line is that magic is like this neutral energy, sort of like the Force, in the Star Wars movies, that there's like the dark side and the light side. Well, that might work with describing duct tape, but it doesn't work describing magic, because in order, the very definition of magic and sorcery is that you have to go and traffic with demons. The basic source of sorcery, to not use a pun, is that you have knowledge and conversation with demon spirits. And if you read the actual magical workbooks, the grimoires from the 1500s and the 1600s that are the foundational stuff, you're communing with angels and genii and spirits and evil spirits and this and that and the other thing. And again, because it's forbidden by the Bible, it's going to be a given that if you try and reach out to these beings, you're not going to get a good angel. You're going to get a bad angel, because Yahweh God will not let a good angel do these things. So the only angels you're going to have any conversation with are going to be evil angels that are deceiving you and making you think that they are good. And let me, if I have a moment, give me one illustration of my own life. I went through a very elaborate, and if the gentleman is familiar with magic at all, he should know about this, a very elaborate and highly regarded ritual called the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage, which is like a very complex thing. It takes 6 months of avid preparation, and it's extremely complicated. And it's to attain that they call it the knowledge and conversation of your holy guardian angel. And at the end of this long, involved 6-month ceremonial preparation, you do this ceremony and you supposedly contact your quote-unquote holy guardian angel. Well, I did it, and I did, but the problem was my quote-unquote holy guardian angel told me a whole bunch of stuff that was absolutely contrary to the Bible. And so obviously he was not an angel of the Almighty. He was a fallen angel. And people forget that it warns us in Paul's epistles that Satan can appear as an angel of light, and so therefore it is no surprise that his ministers can also masquerade as angels and or ministers of righteousness.
Karen was asking, what would you say, or what would that mean to someone who's practicing a system which they believe to come from angels if it actually came from a demon, without passing judgment? I think kind of our question is, it's similar to the argument of your intent. Is what counts as your intent, or is that system still safe to use?
Well, the problem is you can have a good intent and pick up a can of cyanide and drink it and think that is iced tea. But your intent doesn't matter, because it's still going to kill you. I mean,
okay, that's a good way to sum that.
This is a new age kind of idea that it's all in your intent. And to a degree, there's some truth in it. I mean, I think the first 5 years or so that I was involved in magic and the occult, I had a reasonably pure intent. I was not trying to get power or glory. I just wanted wisdom, and because of that, I was kind of kept a little bit out of trouble. But once I put my foot on the dark path, then it's like all bets were off. Because God is merciful. He's going to be patient with us, but He's not going to be patient with you forever. And if you don't realize that this stuff is deadly, because it's out there everywhere. I mean, the Bible is so clear that it is wrong. There's no mistaking about it. And I tell people at one point in my life, in 1984, I just decided I'm going to believe the Bible first over any human voice. And I'm just going to take it as it's given, that it is indeed the Word of God. And since that time, and it's been 23 years almost since I got saved, that I know that it's the Word of God and I believe it, and like the old saying is, God said it, I believe it, that settles it. And, you know, if you want to practice magic, go ahead. It's a free country. But just realize that you're doing something that the ruler of the universe says is abominable and detestable, and it's going to end you up in the lake of fire unless you repent. And all the intentions in the world won't help.
So even if a person has good intentions, or they don't know that what they're drinking is cyanide, or they think it's tea, you're cautioning against that, to put it mildly, huh?
Yes, very much so. And you know, that's, I guess, the bottom line is, no, good intentions ultimately. You know, there's the old canard, you know, that says the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
True.
And that couldn't be more true than in this particular case.
Yeah. As we move over, before we move, I guess, completely off the topic of magic, we will get you into UFOs again, this being live from Roswell and all that. But I noticed from your bio, and I linked it on Amazon for those interested, you have a book titled, which I've not read, Wicca, Satan's Little White Lie. You want to just talk for a couple minutes on what that book's about?
Really, the first major religious change I made in my life was I was raised Catholic, and in college I actually was going to be a priest. I went into minor seminary and the whole bit. And the first major change I made from that was a professor had told me that Yeshua, that Jesus, had gone to the East and studied under these ancient adepti, you know, in Egypt and in Tibet and all this kind of junk. And so if I wanted to be like Jesus, which of course every Christian should, then I should go and do what he did and study the occult. So I went and I started reading everything I got my hands on parapsychology and the occult and all this stuff. And I found out, I got a hold of a book that was called Diary of a Witch by Sybil Lee. And she was really, I think, the very first person in America to be published who came out of the broom closet, so to speak, as a witch.
Is that supposed to be funny?
Mildly. Anyway, and she said, basically, that witchcraft is this ancient religion. Its true name is Wicca, or the Old English pronunciation is Wicca. But I don't know too many Wiccans that say that. They just say Wicca because it's spelled W-I-C-C-A. And so I became a Wiccan. And I was initiated first degree, and then 4 or 5 years later I was initiated the second and then third degree and became a witch high priest. My wife became a high priestess. And we had covens, as I mentioned earlier, all over the west coast of Lake Michigan, in Chicago and in Milwaukee and Racine and so on. So anyhow, this book is basically, as far as I know, one of the very few books out there that's written by a former witch, high priest, that talks about this. And it goes, I mean, Satanism is real popular. There's a lot of books out there on Satanism and stuff like that, but you don't hear a lot about Wicca. Wicca is like the sweet, light, white light side of Satanism, although most witches will deny that. But this book is about Wicca. It explains what witches believe, because we've had so many people writing us over the years. Oh, my daughter has a friend who's a Wiccan, and she met in high school or whatever. Or my son wants to marry a witch, or this or that or the other thing. And it's designed to teach people, okay, this is what Wicca is, this is what it teaches, and this is why, A, it's dangerous, and B, it's contrary to the Bible. So even though, again, kind of like some of your people out there were commenting, well, most witches are good people, they have good intentions, they think they're doing something that's very earth-friendly, because witchcraft is very oriented toward ecology and towards feminism, because it's a feminine religion. It's a religion in which the supreme deity usually, and again there's nuances with different witch traditions, but most witches are feminists, and most witches believe the supreme deity is a goddess, a mother goddess. So when you see someone driving around with a bumper sticker that says, "Be kind to your mother," and then there's this little cartoon of the planet Earth, they're probably a witch.
Or I remember seeing one a long time ago that had the 10 Commandments on, or had what you're saying, it was love your mother with the planet Earth, but obey your father with the 10 Commandments.
Oh, well, yeah, that's not bad either, you know. And we have one lady in our community here driving around, and her bumper sticker says, "My other car is a broomstick."
Yeah.
You know, so you can probably assume she's a Wiccan. So anyhow, it's also designed to be a soul-winning tool, because there's a gospel message in it that explains, if a witch picks it up, reads it, they will be walked through, and it will explain, okay, this is why this stuff, even though it appears to be very good, is actually deceptive, and this is why you need to accept Yeshua, accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, and then renounce witchcraft and the occult. So basically, this is my first major book that I wrote, and I wrote it because I had a heart for all those hundreds of people that my wife and I initiated. And praise Yahweh, some of them have come out. Some of them we've been privileged over the years to lead to the Lord. But as far as I know, most of them are still into it. And so we hope, and we know we've had emails from dozens and dozens of people over the years that are former witches who got saved by reading that book. So that's kind of Wicca in a nutshell.
Let's quit picking on Wiccans and witches for a second. Pick on Masonry.
Okay,
pick on
sure.
Masons. That's another book you also have.
Right. Well, early on,
Mason.
Right. Early on, I joined the Masons on the advice of a very high-level occult guy who was the Grand Master Druid of North America, and he told me if I had a chance, I should join the Masonic Lodge, because it was a place that I could really learn a lot of great Luciferian teachings. Now notice that word, Luciferian, because it's derived from the word Lucifer. So anyhow, I joined the lodge, first 3 degrees, became a Master Mason, and then went through York Rite, went through Scottish Rite, the Shrine, even became a patron of the Eastern Star, associate patron. So, I was deeply into this. I mean, I was in it for 9 years. And that was one of the first things that the Lord had to deal with me when I got saved, because I kept going to Masonic meetings, because I knew that a lot of these guys that were Masons were supposedly, Protestant Christians, Baptist, Lutherans, whatever. And very early on, the Lord showed me from His Word that Masonry is a stench in the nostrils of the Almighty. It's evil. It's profound.
How would you, is there, I'm not aware of, I don't know at all, there's not a thou shalt not commit Masonry that I'm aware of. Why would you say the Bible advises against Masonry?
Well, okay. First of all, because it makes you commit sins against the commandments of God. And I'll give you one very concrete example from first degree. This is the very first level. You go into the lodge, and you're blindfolded, and I'm just cut to the chase on this. There's several things wrong with first degree, but this is the key thing. You're made to kneel at an altar, you're blindfolded, you're told that you're placing your hands on the Holy Bible, and you are, big, huge pulpit Bible, and they make you go through this long, blood-curdling oath. They lead you through it, line upon line. The worshipful master of the lodge is standing there doing this. And then, at the very end, it says, you're made to say this, and all this, I most solemnly and sincerely promise and swear, with a firm resolution to keep and perform the same, binding myself under no less a penalty than that of having my throat cut across, my tongue torn out by its roots, and buried in the sands of the sea, where the tide ebbs and flows twice in 24 hours, shall I ever knowingly violate this, my entered apprentice obligation, so help me God and keep me steadfast in the due performance of the same. Now, that's a lot of work.
Mason, just the first degree into Masonry, that's
very lowest level. And you're swearing on a Bible in the name of God that if you break your bond with these people, if you reveal any of the secrets of the degree, that you'll have your throat cut out and your tongue torn out by the roots. Now, does that sound like something you'd want to do if you were a Christian? Here's the problem. Yeshua, right in the Sermon on the Mount, in Matthew 5:34-37, says, don't swear oaths. He says, let your yea be yea and your nay be nay, because anything else cometh of the evil one. Now, that means those oaths. You are going against the commandments of your Lord, if you're a believer. If you're not a believer, like when I became a Mason, I was a witch. I didn't know the true Yeshua from a doorknob, so I had an excuse. But there are pastors and deacons and Christians by the freight carload that are Masons, and they are deceived out of their toenails. And
on that oath thing, what about a pledge of allegiance to the flag or swearing on a Bible in court then?
Well, let me tell you this. First of all, pledge of allegiance is not the same as an oath. Okay. But I have never and will never take an oath in court. That's why, for example, Amish will never swear an oath in court. That's why Orthodox Jews will never swear an oath, because the Torah says not to. And in the case of Amish, because Jesus says not to. You can stand there and affirm, solemnly affirm, that you will tell the truth in a law court. And I've appeared as an expert witness for the occult and such on numerous occasions. And I just affirm and solemnly I will tell the truth, and that's sufficient for any court of law.
Okay, courts have to accept that. They don't kick you as a witness if you won't swear on the Bible.
No. If anything, a lot of people are impressed by that, because a lot of people, they go up there, they put their hand, yeah, I swear it's all healthy, blah, 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 God, and you can tell that Bible doesn't mean doodly to them. You know, it's just, in fact, that some courts don't even use the Bible anymore, just say you have to tell the truth and it's a legal penalty of perjury. But a lot of people, judges and juries, are actually more impressed that someone is willing to stand by their convictions. And, you know, the problem is that if you know, I'm not saying if you swear an oath you're going to go to hell, but I am saying, because some people bring up, well, you have to do that if you go into the military, or if you go into public office. You have to swear an oath that you will, you know, support and uphold and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And that may be, but see, that's a serious thing. And that may be a little more acceptable because it's for a important, serious thing. But this is something that's sort of frivolous. You know, I mean, and plus you're swearing an oath that you're going to be murdered. So, you know, the other problem, and see, my book deals with all of this stuff. I mean, it talks about the history of Masonry, how it developed, why its origins are right in the slime pits of hell, and then it explains, bing, 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 chapter after chapter, biblical reasons why various things about the lodge are wrong. But here's another problem with it.
You get a lot of hate mail on that book?
Oh, yeah, I've gotten shot at because of that book. Shot at? Poisoned because of that book. Yes. Don't worry, I have a real PR problem. In fact, there's a whole website, which you can find if you Google it, MasonicInfo.com. I'll give them a free plug. And they have this whole thing about how Bill Sneblin is an evil deceiver, and he's a liar, and he's a dumb, deceived person, and all this. And that's fine, you know, they can, you know, I figure you can judge a man by the quality of his enemies, so praise the Lord. Anyway, yeah, I get a lot of hate mail about that book. But the other thing I just want to briefly note is it says in 2 Corinthians we are not to be unequally yoked with unbelievers. And if you're a Christian and you join the lodge, they literally put a rope around your neck and bind you to the lodge in first degree with that rope.
A yoke.
A yoke. Yeah, I mean, it couldn't be any more obvious. And then when they take the yoke off, after you've sworn this blood-curdling oath and you've been enlightened, quote-unquote, they say, remove the cable tow, which is what this little blue cord is called. Remove the cable tow from our brother Mason from around his neck, because he is now bound by a much stronger spiritual tie to our fraternity. Now, here's the thing. There's thousands of Masons that are not believers in Yeshua. There's thousands more that are witches, that are Muslims, that are Hindus, that are Buddhists. Because I have a dear friend of the Lord who was in the military in North Africa during World War II, and he was obligated as a Mason in Cairo. And in Cairo, you take your obligation on the Quran, because that's the principal holy book of the country of Egypt. If you go to India, it's the Bhagavad Gita or the Rig Veda. So, you know, people that say, oh, well, Masons have a Bible on their altar. Well, yeah, it's a decoration. It's a piece of furniture. That's all it means to them. Because there's thing after thing in the lodge that is actually a violation of the commandments.
I think we should pick on Christians next. This is because I've met you a couple times here in Roswell, and
sure.
In case we don't really get into it in detail, there is a link under Bill's photo on Live from Roswell. He's actually discussed, from the occultist point of view, former Satanist point of view, opinions on a lot of occult or even satanic activity related to the UFO phenomena. So I'll just tell people now, there's a link to ancientofdays.net under that for our UFOs and Bible Prophecy Conference hosted as a one-day event. And Bill does talk on that. And, you know, plug. With self-promotion. But those DVDs
I even have a book called Space Invaders.
Oh, yeah, and that is also linked to Space Invaders. I've got the text linked in your bio. But our DVDs are name-your-own-price donation basis. So whenever you hear me bring that up, and I do, A, I don't draw income from it, and B, you can just send a couple bucks, and, you know, we wind up eating postage sometimes. So we love those people who send us $100. But I know from hanging out with you the times you've been in Roswell is that you're quite a little different from what most people would brand as a Christian. And just in short, I know, A, you practice more Hebraic Christianity than the average Christian. You're an ordained rabbi, even wearing a yarmulke. And even organizationally, you've got you're not under what most Christian churches are today, a 501c3. Is there
No.
any topic along that? 'Cause what I'm asking is, have you found that some of your beliefs, practices, and convictions actually make Christians mad at you?
Oh yes. And I think it's because, and I mean, to say that I'm against Christians is certainly not true, because if you define a Christian as someone who follows Yeshua or Jesus, then I'm one of them. But the difference is that I think I'm just trying to press further in and really be sincere about that profession. Because as some of your listeners know, there's a lot of people out there that they have this kind of easy believism. They say, oh, I went to the altar and I prayed the sinner's prayer and glory, hallelujah, I am saved and on my way to heaven and hallelujah. And that's all fine. But there's something beyond that. I mean, I tell people it's kind of like if you were to, go and have your wedding and profess your undying love for your sweetie, and then have your wedding night and then never talk to her again. That wouldn't be much of a marriage relationship. You want to press in deeper with your beloved. You want to press in deeper with Yeshua. And people, wear this thing, like I see people wearing things around their neck or little bracelets and say, what would Jesus do? Here's the funny thing. If you look at what Jesus actually did, he was Jewish. He never ate pork. He kept the Sabbath. He kept the Torah. And he said right in Matthew 5, right in the Sermon on the Mount, he said, think not that I've come to destroy the law, but to fulfill the law. And then just a couple of verses after that, he said that therefore anyone who teaches anybody to break one of the least of these commandments and teaches men so shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. And anyone who teaches people that they should keep all these commandments shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven.
You just snapped me to something or an argument or a way of thinking that I hadn't seen before.
Okay.
Because a lot of people will say, if you don't do like I do, if you don't do like I teach, you're going to hell.
Right.
You just quoted that that's not even what Jesus said.
No.
It's a ranking or a reward kind of thing, perhaps?
Well, I think so, yes. And I think I just finish the point I wanted to make, is that people will say, well, what was Jesus talking about at that point? You got to realize when he was preaching the Sermon on the Mount, there was no New Testament.
Mm-hmm.
The only commandments that any of his listeners knew about were the Torah, were the commandments of the Old Testament. I hate to use that expression because it's not really old, but I mean that's what he was referring to. And then he would go on and he would say, you have heard it written, thou shalt not commit adultery, which is one of the 10 commandments. Then he said, but I say unto you that if you even look after a woman with lust in your heart, you have committed adultery. And he was calling his Talmudim, his disciples, to an even higher form of Torah. And it's not about salvation. I do not, and please let me be very clear about this. You're not saved by keeping the Torah, because if you would be, all these, Orthodox Jews would be saved. But nobody can do it. That's the whole point of the Torah, is that no one can keep all of those 613 commandments.
That's what you experienced in Mormonism, I guess.
Right, exactly. I got burnt out trying to do all these different, I have a whole video on that. It's called What's Wrong with Mormonism, how you can just literally run yourself into the ground like a little gerbil in a cage, trying to keep all of these commandments. But Yeshua came to set us free from that. But then we turn around, and he says in John's Gospel, if you love me, keep my commandments. And that's how you show that you love him. It's important to witness people, to tell them about the Lord. It's important to support your local congregation. It's important to give money to the poor and all that kind of stuff. All that's very, very worthwhile. But it's also important, I believe, as an expression of your faith, that you be as faithful as you can to the Torah, and also to keep the feast. Because
exactly, that's what I'm asking about. Because we had Norm Franz on a while back on Easter, a Christian who basically believes that Easter and Christmas are pagan holidays that he cannot, as a Christian in good conscience, observe. I think you're in the exact same section, right?
I totally agree.
On the feast.
Yes, we just had Passover a couple of weeks ago, and that is a feast of the Lord. It's not a quote-unquote Jewish feast. And the funny thing is that if you really want to be serious
about doing what Yeshua did, you need to keep Passover. You need to keep the other feasts, the Feast of Tabernacles, like right now we're coming up on the Feast of Shavuot, of Pentecost. And then there's, the other feasts, the fall feast. And there is a calendar of Yahweh's feasts. And you can learn so much more about the Bible and about prophecy and about end-time events. Because the funny thing is Yeshua fulfilled the spring feast by his first coming. But he's going to fulfill the fall feast in his second coming. And if you study that out and you really make a deep Bible study, and there's some excellent books by Messianic writers, and that's basically what I am. I'm a Messianic believer, which means I practice Hebraic, what the same stuff the apostles did, the same stuff that was done in the Bible for millennia, until the Jewish part of Christianity was basically beaten out of it in the 2nd century, literally. Because there's every evidence. If you study the New Testament, the book of Acts carefully, you'll see the apostles were going to the temple every day, even after the resurrection. Paul and all the apostles were going to synagogue. They were keeping Sabbath. All of this stuff. And I know people are going to say, "Oh, well, yeah, but what about this? What about that?" And that's
how does that relate to Christmas and Easter, though? The typical Christian holidays.
Those are abominable. I mean,
that's a strong word. That's an interesting way of putting it.
Yeah, because they're both pagan feasts, and it says several places in the Old Testament that we are not to do the things the Gentiles do. See, Christmas was originally a witch holiday called Yule. That's why you hear Yuletide greetings even to this very day. That's a pagan holiday. And Easter, and I'm sure Norm talked about this, Easter is named after the goddess Aostra, who's the goddess of spring and fertility, and her sacred animal is, guess what, a bunny rabbit. And her symbol is an egg. So, people ask, well, what do bunnies and eggs have to do with Jesus rising from the dead? And that's an excellent good point, because the answer is absolutely nothing. They have nothing to do with it. And if people, here's like an example. Just one little thing. People put up Christmas trees, and they put up, like tinsel and ornaments all over it.
Right.
That's based on a pagan practice, which Jeremiah condemned specifically in his book. And the interesting thing is in the ancient days they would make golden balls, and they would be symbolic of the testicles of Tammuz, who was a pagan god, and they would hang these on the tree so that people would have a fertile year.
So people are hanging Christmas balls there, literally.
It kind of gives a whole new meaning to the idea of a Christmas ornament. And I know people. Well, go ahead, finish. I'm sorry. And I know people have done this, and it's funny. There's another line. I think it's in Jeremiah where he says, "We have inherited lies from our fathers." We've done this, and I did this all through my life as both a believer and as a non-believer. I had Christmas trees and all this stuff because I didn't know any better. But, the more you read the Bible, the more you study these things out, you find out that both Christmas and Easter are pagan holidays. And we're told, to come out from among them and be separate. I quoted that earlier in regards to the Freemasons, but it's also true about these pagan holidays. Instead, I'll tell you, there's such wonderful, rich truths. If you study up and follow Passover and the Feast of Tabernacles, which is called Sukkot, and the Feast of Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement, the Feast of Pentecost, which is just coming up in May. I mean, there's such richness in these things compared to all the fa-la-la-la-la and commercial junk that you see around Christmas. And that's the funny thing. I mean, I was at the Feast of Tabernacles last year with some fellow Messianics in Ohio. And one guy said, my friends say, well, this is so hard. You got to go somewhere and camp out for 8 days and this and that, I says, hey, I'd rather do this because it's like a vacation than go through all the nuttiness that most Christians go through over Christmas. They're out running around when they're being trampled in the malls trying to buy the latest toys and presents for kids and this and that and the other thing, and getting involved in all that commercial junk, And it's insane. And there's a reason why the suicide rate goes through the roof over the Christmas season. Yeah. So I just say, hey, unplug yourself from Rome. Unplug yourself from the commercial church and follow Yeshua and do what he did. Because I can guarantee you, he didn't celebrate Christmas.
Right. well, it didn't come around. But that's interesting. I just wanted to know. It's like you said earlier, though. Hey, I just want to make sure we offended everybody on the show before you were gone. Not just witches, not just Mormons or Masons, but let's offend some Christians too, just for fun, so we can call it a full day.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm saying all this in love, and even this, I make some derogatory remarks about Mormons and what have you. They're all wonderful people, but they need the Lord. And in the case of the Christians that don't understand this, they're going to be held accountable, because it says in Hosea 4:6, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge." And that's a verse that many people are familiar with. But if you look further in that verse, it says, "Because you have forgotten my law, my Torah," it says, "I will forget your children." And then you wonder why our young people. Well, I actually want to be sure I'm quoting a verse right, but that's essentially it. Here, let's see. "My people are destroyed of lack of knowledge. Because thou hast rejected knowledge, I will reject thee, and thou shalt be no priest for me." Oh, here it is. "Seeing thou hast forgotten the law of thy God, I will also forget thy children." And see, the vast majority of Christian churches today have forgotten the law of God. And then we wonder why our kids are in so much trouble.
That's a fascinating view, then. We've got about 10 minutes on the show, 8 or 10. Is there a topic that I haven't asked you about, first off, that you would actually say was, on your heart to bring up when you came on the show?
Well, let me just unpack this thing we just discussed real briefly. One more thing, because immediately when you discuss this sort of stuff, you're accused of being a legalist, or you're being a Judaizer, or whatever the case might be. And all I can say to that is, I was in two of the most legalistic religions in the world, Roman Catholicism and Mormonism. So I know what it is to be a legalist. And this ain't legalism. Because legalism says, and I'm quoting here the Mormon teaching right out of their Articles of Faith, that you are saved by obedience to the laws and ordinances of the gospel. That's legalism. It means you're saved by doing stuff. Whether it's good stuff or whether it's stuff that's not even in the Bible, that's how you're saved. True Christianity says you are saved by grace through faith, Ephesians 2:8-9. But it also says in James that faith without works is dead. and so you need to demonstrate your faith both to the Almighty and to the people around you by doing good deeds. And those good deeds include keeping the commandments. So, please understand this is not legalism. Because I do this, and I'll tell you this much. I've been a Messianic since 1988, and I've had this deeper walk with the Torah for the last 4 years. And it has drawn me so much closer to Him. And my love for Yeshua, my love for the Bible, my love for His people has just grown exponentially in the last 4 years. And I think my wife would agree with this statement, that I've become much more of a great lover of God and of His Word as a result of this. It's drawn me much closer to Him. And I think that's what we have to do. We have to draw closer to Him, because as these end times come along, things are going to get nuttier and nuttier and more dangerous. There's going to be more and more deception. And if you don't know your Bible, you're going to be deceived. And of course, the UFO thing is one of many ways in which people can be deceived. And
talk about that a little bit. Since you have a large book, Space Invaders.
Yes, well, it's not that large, but it's packed. and I guess the reason I even felt led to write it, we started getting people coming to us who believed they'd been abducted by aliens, and who felt that all kinds of bad stuff had been done to them, whether women believed they had their ovaries removed or whatever, just strange things and terrifying things, and things that left them with what in a secular world we called a PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And we were really struggling and seeking God about, okay, how do we help these people? Because we believe that hell has no answer, that heaven cannot heal. Amen?
Hell has no what?
I said, hell has no hurt that heaven cannot heal. And in other words, no matter what the devil can throw at you, Yeshua has the answer. And we knew that about this. And so we started ministering to some of these people. And I'd say about 2% of the people we minister to are survivors of what they think is alien abduction. And so that's kind of what led us to write this book, because today there is a huge, very loosely knit network of people who are UFO enthusiasts, but many of whom have attached a religious component to this. They aren't just looking at UFOs from a scientific perspective to see, hey, is this really something that's out there, or is this just swamp gas or weather balloons or whatever? But in addition to that, they believe that these beings are going to come and save us. They believe that they are going to come and somehow rescue us from ecological disasters, from nuclear disasters, whatever the case might be. They are looking to saucer people for their salvation instead of looking to Yeshua. And that is the danger, and that's why we started writing this book. And the ultimate message of it is that if you look at the message of these space alien people, you know, as it's delivered through their various spokespeople here on the Earth, and of course we know what happened to Bo and Peep, who were two of the prominent UFO cult leaders in the 90s and 80s. They ended up having that whole Heaven's Gate thing, where many of their followers and themselves committed suicide.
Now, wouldn't you say that's a very extreme example, though, not representative of ufology in general, or just more indicative?
I think it's an extreme example of the religious wing of ufology. I would say, and I consider myself a ufologist. I mean, I study UFOs extensively. I've been studying them since 1966. So that's like, 40 years ago? It's not like I'm not out there in the movement, but when you start attributing religious qualities to these things and thinking they're going to save you, and thinking that this spaceship is going to come on a comet like that particular group did, and admittedly, that's the only example of that. But yet, then you look at these Raelians, who's another kind of strange group, and they were running this scam a couple of years ago where supposedly they were going to clone a human being in all of this. I mean, there's some high-profile and some low-profile groups out there that teach some very goofy stuff, and especially when you consider they're drawing people away from the truth. They're drawing people away from Yeshua, because most of these space brothers, quote-unquote, teach that Yeshua was an alien, which in a certain sense he was, at least on his father's side. But I mean, he came down.
You better clarify that statement.
Obviously Yeshua was not of this world. He came here, from heaven, not from the planet Kolob or the planet Tralfamador or the planet Mars.
Okay.
So that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that he's an alien-like in the sense that they mean, but that's what many of these people will teach you. They believe the second coming is going to be Yeshua coming in a UFO, landing on the Earth with all these little green or gray guys or whatever you want to call them, and he's going to make everything better. But that, you see, that is not the gospel of the Bible. And the Bible speaks about UFOs. And I demonstrate that in my book, that this is not something the Bible is ignorant of. It's not something that God is surprised by, but that we need to be very careful, because this abduction thing is being used to deceive people. Because in Genesis chapter 6, it refers to the fact that the sons of God fell. They came down to earth, they had relations with human women, and produced extraordinary offspring. And that's a matter of some controversy among theologians, but that's the plain meaning of the text. And I know you have some excellent teachings on some of your DVDs that go into that in much more depth. But the point is, just as that was happening then, it's happening today, because Yeshua said, as it was in the days of Noah, so will it be in the days of the coming of the Son of Man. And so today we're seeing alien abduction. It's a modern-day package.
I'm sorry. Scientific UFO reports aside,
yes,
you're thinking a lot of the abduction phenomena is related to a recurrence of Genesis 6, right?
Yes, I do. That is what I teach and what I believe, certainly. And we have found from ministering to people that in every abduction we've encountered, there is always a demonic component. And what I personally believe is that most of, not all, but I think most of these UFO sightings, especially when you get into close encounters of the third and the fourth kind, are actually craft that are being piloted by fallen angels. They're not necessarily little aliens from Zeta Reticuli or something. I don't know if there are really people out there on other planets, because the Bible doesn't really say. But I do know what the Bible says about deception in the end times. And I think there certainly is a place for the scientific discussion about these things, and certainly for the scientific investigation of life on other worlds. and of what the UFO phenomenon really is. And I've been a part of that discussion for almost, a generation. But I also think we need to be wary when people start slapping a religious veneer on these things and using it to deceive people, leading them away from the truth, which is that you need Yeshua and you need his cross and his blood in order to be saved.
That's probably from your motive of being here. We're down to like 30 seconds, so I think I'm going to let you end the show with those words. I'll remind people we have had Nick Redfern and the book Celebrity Secrets on the show today. He is linked from livefromroswell.com. Thank you also Bill Sneblin, whose website and books are all linked from livefromroswell.com at the moment. We've also had the Antibodies as a MySpace Featured Artist of the Week. And if you're listening from Australia, I'll remind you to mail me a T-shirt at the bottom of the address at the bottom of livefromroswell.com. I'll mail you a DVD or two as well, just to say thanks for that. And upcoming, we have Peter Robbins, Adam Go Rightly, and Michael Heiser, Ph.D., on future shows. See our schedule at Live from Roswell. Thanks very much for joining us, both listeners, speakers, guests, and participants. I'm Guy Malone, and I'm going to sign off here before this conversation gets more heated than the rest of us care for. Bill, thank you very much, though, and thanks, folks, for joining me.
You bet.
Some look for a one-night stand while others look for love. Just be careful of the things you do, cause it just might do you in. Might look real good to you, a real life paradise. You better dress right for a dangerous time if you're gonna ride in a suicide ride. Times have changed and you can't see